Welcome to the Injury to Recover YouTube channel. My name is Greg, and this is Blaine from Recover Physical Therapy. Blaine, how you doing this week?
Doing good. Ready for another video.
Oh, I'm ready to do some more exercises. You can put me through some pain. Before we get into the topic, I was talking with a friend of mine, and he was talking about his experience with a physical therapist, and he said, I think they're kind of like mad scientists with your body, and they get you into situations where you have more pain than you really think you should have, but it helps you in the long term. So.
Sometimes, yes.
So, as a mad scientist, what are we working on this week?
IT band pain, or IT band syndrome is what they call it.
Okay, all right. Well, so I've had that diagnosis from time to time, and I got the IT band diagnosis when I was dealing with my knee. You are pretty familiar with it. You know that it wasn't necessarily the knee that was really the issue. But is this like a diagnosis that isn't always, like just is kind of given out there sometimes when you don't know what's going on? I'm just out of curiosity.
Sometimes I think it is, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's, sometimes I think it's diagnosed accurately, but I think that does happen sometimes.
Yeah. And I bring that up for the following reason. If you feel like you're trying to really understand what's going on with your body, you really need to keep asking questions, especially if whatever treatment plan you're going through, you need to make sure that you keep asking questions until you get the results that are best, because you're the one that's inside of your body. So anyway, that's just recommendation from Greg on that one. I'm not a professional therapist, so I can say things like this.
No, I think it's great, and I often tell patients, like, you're the only one that knows what it feels like, so we need lots of your feedback, and sometimes there's a quote that says, if you listen to your patients long enough, they'll tell you what's wrong with them, so sometimes that's the best way to diagnose stuff.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes a little while to get through it too.
Yeah.
What does the injury usually come from?
It often comes from either running or cycling. Yeah. The IT band is a big piece of connective tissue that runs from your hip to your knee down the side of your thigh, and it connects to a muscle called your tensor fascia lata, kind of a strange name. We usually just call it the TFL, but it's right near the side of your hip. And it goes all the way down and it crosses your knee joint. So you can actually have IT band pain in your hip. And I think that's where sometimes it can get misdiagnosed, because there's a lot of things that can cause pain right here in your hip. Mm-hmm. Runners often feel it in the side of their knee here. People who run lengthy distances can get IT band pain. And sometimes you feel it somewhere in between along the side of your thigh.
So just so that we got a good video, you said it connects with what's the name of that fascia?
The TFL, or tensor fascia lata.
And that's on your hip, but then the IT band goes from what I understand, it's the ball of your hip right here, right? That femur point of the bone where it kind of juts out, right?
Yeah, or just slightly behind the bone, actually.
Slightly behind it?
Yep.
And then it goes all the way down to here.
Yes, and it is a big piece of connective tissue. I remember in PT school when we were dissecting cadavers, and you could see the IT band, and that is a big, tough piece of tissue.
Pretty thick too, because even you can feel it on the outside of your body usually. So
yeah, and it's quite wide. I mean, it's a couple inches wide.
Right.
So bigger than you think it is.
Yeah, and it's not a muscle per se.
It connects to a muscle in your hip, but correct, it's not a muscle.
Yeah, so if it gets stretched out wrong, I can imagine that would be pretty painful.
Yeah, it's a piece of supportive tissue, and it puts a lot of support in both your hip and your knee.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm guessing we have some exercises that go along with this today.
We do, yeah. There's a lot of good things. It's usually just a combination of strengthening is the most thing. A lot of videos you see on YouTube or on the internet of IT band syndrome are stretching based, and stretching is important, but strengthening is more important. So we'll show you some stretches today, but we'll probably focus more on strengthening, because that's more of a better long-term solution.
Yeah, and that's what we're looking for, long-term solutions that actually have a recovery for you. So, all right, let's get to it.
Alrighty. So this first exercise is more of a hip flexor stretch. And so for this one, it's good to be on the very edge of a bed. And you want to scoot, Greg, you want to kind of scoot this way just to the very, very edge of the bed there. and you'll kind of lay back while you hold onto one knee, while your other leg that you're not holding falls down towards the floor. And you should feel a pretty good stretch on the front of your hip there, the one that's falling down. So that's
right there.
So you want to be on a fairly tall bed or table for this one, and you can hold this for about 30 seconds on you. Even if you're only hurting on one side, you want to do this on both sides to keep yourself symmetrical. But this is a good hip flexor stretch.
And I'm just letting my foot hang.
Yeah.
Right here, right?
Yeah, and then it is cutting off your foot. Is that okay, or do you want me to?
How much is it cutting off?
Like basically from here down.
Oh man.
Sorry, I should have mentioned that
The
earlier.
problem is it cuts off my head the other on
Yeah.
the top. So yeah, we'll just do that.
I think it's okay like
We'll
that.
do that. And then I'll do the other side.
Yeah, you want me to lock the wheels?
I think we'll be all right.
Okay. And then here he is doing the opposite side. And he's kind of scooted off to the edge of the table to allow his leg to fall down a little bit further. Okay, for this next exercise, this is called the foam roll. So this is a really common one. You'll see a lot of people promoting foam rolling for IT band pain. And so Greg just has a firm foam roll, and he's just rolling up and down and kind of using gravity to let that roller really dig into that IT band. And it's basically running from the side of his knee all the way up to the side of his hip. And this can be it looks simple, but it's quite painful.
Yeah. This is making me sweat already.
Yeah, that's just a lot of pressure on the IT band. And there isn't a ton of medical research that supports foam rolling as being an effective intervention for IT band pain. And that doesn't mean it's not effective. I have talked to a lot of people that have IT band pain and they swear by this method. And so a lot of runners will do this after their run or before their run. And we'll generally include it in therapy because I think it can help. I think it's good to combine with exercises. But I think really the best long-term solutions are more strengthening based. And this one is more of a stretch of the IT band.
Yeah. And I have tight IT bands. So, is that common for runners actually to have a tight IT band?
Not necessarily, but I mean you see it pretty often. Yeah. Runners are kind of notorious for being really good at running lots of miles and then maybe neglecting some cross training.
Yeah, that's me. And that might be what it is. So.
Yeah. This next exercise, we're going to go back and keep strengthening the hip abductors. And so a good way to do this is to do hip hikes. And so we're using a ball. So Greg is leaning against the wall. And you'll notice the foot that he's standing on, the knee actually stays locked straight the entire way. So the up and down motion you see is him lifting his pelvis side to side. So lifting that right hip up and down. And you can see your hip drop up and down. So if you had x-ray vision, you'd see your pelvis tilting, rocking left and right as you do this. But you want to keep the knee locked out straight the whole time you do this. And so what's that feeling like in your hip, Greg?
It's getting a lot of the smaller muscles.
Yeah.
Like, I'll come this way again. So where I notice it is I notice it on like a little one right here, and then these on the front, because they're the ones that I'm guessing are making that motion mostly, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, a lot of the muscles in the back here too.
The top of my glute.
Yep.
I'm feeling that quite a bit actually. So.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're targeting, and this is an exercise that looks fairly easy and fairly simple, but you only have to do about 5 or 10 reps till you start to feel a pretty good burn.
Oh yeah. I can see how good this would be for a runner though, because if you think about runners, it's the hip motion that you're doing when you're trying to run quickly.
Yeah. These are really crucial muscles too for walking, and so this is also a good like longevity type exercise. If you're to build this up, this is also good for older adults who are wanting to avoid having to use a cane or just retain their independence and mobility. Keeping those hips strong is crucial, and muscles that often get weak and kind of fly under the radar, and you don't realize how important they are until you lose them. Alright, so we're going to get into some strengthening now. This next exercise I really like because it's kind of a 2-in-1. You're going to cross one foot over your opposite knee, and so you get a little bit of a stretch on your right hip here, and then you're going to bridge up on your other leg, so you're getting a good strengthening exercise on your left side. And so again, you want to do this on both sides. But this is a really effective exercise to strengthen those glutes in the back and to stretch on the opposite side. So if you can, it's quite challenging, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this would be a great, really for any runner, both as a preventative or as a treatment exercise if you already have IT band pain. But this is a great exercise.
When you're teaching runners to do cross training, this would be one of those exercises you probably want them to do regularly. I think I saw a video of Eliud Kipchoge doing similar type of exercises like this.
Yeah.
He does dead bug and bridges and things like that.
Yeah.
So.
I assume he has access to the best trainers and resources in the world.
Yeah, don't take our word for it. Look for people that are professionals like that. You think about him running a marathon super fast.
So these next exercises are a series of strengthening exercises. And so you can start out kind of the more basic form is to just come up in a plank, a side plank. So Greg is putting pressure through his knee and through his elbow. And you should feel that working the side of your hip as you come up. This is a good beginner's way to start out.
The lower hip, right?
Yes, the one closer to the ground. And then if you want to make this a little bit more challenging, what you can do is you can plank up and hold the plank while you're adding a clamshell. So you keep your feet together and open your knees apart like a clam. And that works both hips a little bit more. And this adds a little bit of rotation in that top hip.
I want to do it all in one motion, but probably does it matter if you do it all in one motion?
So you can break it up. How you're doing is just fine. You can also just hold the plank the entire time, and while you're holding the plank, just up and down. I don't know if one's better than the other, but those are two variations.
Okay.
But you're probably getting a pretty good burn in your hip by now, I assume.
Yeah. We're gonna take this to the next level too, aren't we?
Yep. And then if you go all the way up into a side plank, so he's lifted his knee up, so now he's on his elbow and his foot. And you can just hold that, and that'll burn you out real quick if you hold that for very long. Yep. If you want to make it really challenging, probably the most challenging way to do this is to add a hip abduction leg lift there. And so this is going to work both hips really well. So if you can do 10 of these on both sides, then you're doing pretty good. You've got decent strength in your hips if you can do that one. And if you can't do that one, just start with those easier ones we started with, and you can eventually build your way up to it.
Yeah.
So for the next exercise here, this is called a hip adductor squeeze. So your hip adductors are on the inside of your thighs, and we more commonly refer to them as your groin muscles. Mm-hmm. But whenever we strengthen muscles on one side, we want to hit the other side too. So these are the opposite of your abductor, abductor. These are your AD adductors. So a good way to do this is just to fold a pillow in half like Greg has, and you can just do some squeezes, some isometric squeezes.
Tense the muscle.
Yep, you just pinch that pillow with your knees and hold it for about 1 or 2 seconds and relax, and repeat that several times. You can also do this with a small ball, or like the yoga mat you were just laying on, you can roll it up and put it between your knees. And so after you do this, you should start to feel a pretty good strain in your groin. And those hip adductors, your groin muscles, are really important muscles for athleticism. Mm-hmm. And so you often don't realize how much you use them or rely on them until you maybe strain one or have a pain in one. But athletes who are good athletes always have good hip adductors. So this is a good exercise to cross-train for runners and to also improve your athleticism. All right.
Yeah.
So this last exercise we'll show you is also a strengthening. So these are called monster walks. You got a band around your knees. This is phase 1, or the easiest phase. And you're just keeping a slight bend in your knees as you walk side to side. So you should feel this working the muscles in the side of your hips a little bit. And so if we want to move on to phase 2, if that gets easy and you want to make it a little bit more challenging, you put the band down around your ankles, and that puts a little bit more torque and forces you to use those hips a little bit stronger.
I got a question for you on this.
Yeah.
Because I've had physical therapists give me monster walks as an exercise.
Uh-huh.
And one of them was very, very specific. He said, you cannot let your head bounce. Like, he said that I was bouncing too much as I'm doing these. Mm-hmm. And I was compensating for the muscle that he was trying to strengthen. He's like, you're doing it wrong, and it's not going to help if you don't do it right. So is there anything specific you have to do to make sure that you are doing these correctly? Or does it matter?
I think he gave you good advice, and the reason he told you that is he's trying to really force you to maintain good control and not just use your momentum to get through the exercise. Because our bodies were really good at just using momentum to find the path of least resistance. But if you go really slow and controlled like you're doing it, then that does force you to really use those muscles in your hips more effectively. I wouldn't say it's not going to help you if you don't do it perfectly, but it is good to go slow and controlled.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
All right, phase 3, right?
Yeah, phase 3, the most difficult version of this is if you put this band around your toes. So, and you're going to do the same thing. So when the band is around your toes, the band moves around your toes or your forefeet. So this is the most challenging version, and this will actually engage more muscles in your glutes, in your bottom. And that's because with the band around your toes, it's trying to force you to kind of toe inward, and you have to keep your feet facing forward, and that forces some of those hip rotators in your glutes to work extra hard. So you're probably feeling a pretty good burn right now, I assume, Greg?
Yeah, this is a good exercise. Oh,
yeah.
Got the snap.
So that is a bread and butter exercise, really for other running injuries as well. But for IT band pain, that is a really effective way to keep your hip strong. So this last exercise is going to be a hip flexor strengthening exercise. This is kind of an advanced way to do it. If this is challenging for you, you can also do it by just laying on the floor and on your back doing leg lifts. But by hanging from a bar and then kicking one foot forward kind of quickly, it's kind of a quick motion. And after a few reps, you should start to feel a pretty good burn on the front of your hip. You feeling it yet, Greg?
Yep.
And your other leg just kind of dangles there.
Yeah.
And so this will also challenge your grip strength a little bit, which is always good. But just doing some like forward thrust kicks there, really good for the hip flexors, the muscles in the front of your hips. And that is a good way to also keep your IT bands healthy by keeping those nice and strong.
I always like working on my legs. There's something about, maybe it's just because I like to run and things like that, but it's always nice to work on them.
Yeah. So if you go through those, I think we just showed 6 or 7 exercises. That's a fairly complete list of exercises that will keep your hips strong and keep that IT band nice and supported and strong. One other thing I might mention is that a lot of IT band pain, I mentioned it's most common in runners and cyclists. I need to mention that one of the best ways to manage that type of injury is also with load management. So a lot of times if you're just maybe running too many miles without building up to it gradually enough, or if you're not giving yourself adequate rest after your runs, that's a common cause for IT band pain. So these exercises we've showed you are very important, but it's also important for you to have proper load management in your running miles or your cycling miles.
That reminds me back to our plantar fasciitis video, where if you increase the miles really quickly, you can also cause plantar fasciitis when you're running. And so it's probably just a basic concept, but sometimes it's nice to just bring up some of those basic concepts of, remember, you don't want to add too much. So just because we haven't treated this in any one of our videos, what's the normal recommendation? About 10% a week of increase in speed and length, or is there, or in distance?
Yeah, 10% is a good kind of rule of thumb. There's a lot of variability there. If that's too fast for some people, and other people can probably handle increasing quickly. A lot depends on how much history you have of running or cycling. A lot of other factors play into that as well. If you have a history of weightlifting, or if you're just more prone to tendonitis, like some people are.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, I like that, and I also appreciated some of the comments that you had on, some of these exercises will actually help with your longevity. So you might want to pay attention to some of those, and maybe you'll be able to walk well into your 90s. That's where I hope to be. So
yeah, yep. It's a lot of good analogies between exercising and like financial investing. It's kind of an investment. And so if you just spend a little bit of time investing in your strength early on, then when you do get into your 80s and 90s, then that will start to pay off. Just like if you put a little bit of money in your account every month, that comes back to serve you when you get old.
Yeah. All right. Well, I definitely want to put that investment into my life. So thanks, Blaine.
Yep. Thanks, Greg.